Imagine a place where the ground beneath your feet isn't just land. It's a fragment of the sky itself, a solid piece of cloud realm, so high up that the very air you breathe feels like a stolen secret from the heavens. This isn't a fantasy prologue. This is the visceral, staggering reality of Earth. Has high-altitude plateaus. And the story they tell isn't just one of breathtaking scenery, but a silent, desperate thriller of geological upheaval, atmospheric manipulation, and a biological struggle so extreme it redefines the word life. We are about to embark on a 5,000-word journey to one of the most alien landscapes on our own planet, a place where the sky isn't a ceiling, but a neighbor, and the clouds aren't passing by. They are an integral, crushing, life-giving, and life-taking part of the ecosystem. The shocking hook, the core truth we must grasp from the very first second is this: these plateaus, like the Tibetan Plateau, the Altiplano, or the Ethiopian highlands, are not merely high mountains. They are active, breathing entities that are currently, and I mean right now, as you watch this video, warping global weather patterns, forcing human bodies to genetically adapt, and holding within their frozen soils a ticking clock that could accelerate climate change in ways our models can't even fully predict. This is a narrative of a land that touches the sky. To understand the sheer scale of this confrontation between Earth and atmosphere, we need to comprehend the forces that built these stages in the clouds. We are talking about a slow-motion collision of continental plates, a process measured in millions of years, where the Earth's crust, instead of buckling and forming jagged peaks exclusively, gets compressed and uplifted as one massive, relatively flat block. Think of it as a giant pressing down on the edge of a thick rug. The rug doesn't just form a single fold, a huge section of it rises up. This is continental collision 101. The Indian subcontinent, for instance, didn't just build the Himalayas. It used the Himalayas as a battering ram to shove the entire Tibetan Plateau, an area roughly the size of Western Europe, to an average elevation of over 4,100 meters, or 15,000 feet. That's the critical data point. This isn't a peak. This is an entire country in the sky. The energy required for this is beyond human comprehension. It's the planet's own kinetic energy, its tectonic fury, made manifest in a form of serene, sprawling gray air. And this process never truly stops. GPS measurements today show that the Tibetan Plateau is still rising millimeter by relentless millimeter, even as erosion tries to wear it down. This eternal push and pull between creation and decay is the first chapter of our story, setting the stage, quite literally, for everything that follows. The ground is alive, it is moving, and it is climbing. Now, place this colossal, elevated table and directly into the path of the planet's atmospheric engine. This is where the magic and the global influence truly begin. A high-altitude plateau acts less like a mountain and more like a monstrous speed bump in the sky for jet streams and monsoon winds. The data here is unequivocal. The Tibetan Plateau, often called the third pole or the roof of the world, is the primary driver of the Asian summer monsoon, the lifeblood for nearly 3 billion people. Here is how it works. During summer, the plateau's vast surface heats up faster than the surrounding air over the oceans. This hot air rises, creating a powerful, persistent low-pressure zone over the land. This thermal low acts like a massive atmospheric pump, sucking in moist, warm air from the Indian and Pacific Oceans. This air is then forced to rise over the plateau's southern edges, cooling, condensing, and releasing the torrential rains of the monsoon. Without this plateau, the climate of Asia would be unrecognizable, likely turning large swathes of India and Southeast Asia into arid lands. Plateau doesn't just create weather, it engineers the climate for half a continent. It is the planet's most powerful and influential weather machine, a fact confirmed by countless climatic models and paleoclimate data from ice cores and lake sediments, which show a direct correlation between the plateau's uplift millions of years ago and the intensification of the monsoon system. This landform is pulling the strings of civilizations from above. But what does it feel like to be a living creature on this skyborne stage? The biological data paints a picture of a relentless, Darwinian pressure cooker. At 4,000 meters, the atmospheric pressure is only about 60% of what it is at sea level. This means 40% less oxygen molecules in every lungful of air. For humans, this triggers immediate physiological distress, acute mountain sickness, with its headaches and nausea and long-term. It forces an incredible adaptation. Populations like the Tibetans, Andeans, and Ethiopians have spent thousands of years at these altitudes, and their genomes tell a story of radical evolution. Research published in journals like Nature and Science has identified specific genes, such as EPAS1 in Tibetans, that allow for more efficient oxygen use. Their bodies produce fewer red blood cells than a lowlander would at altitude, preventing their blood from becoming dangerously thick, a direct genetic solution to a lethal environmental challenge. This isn't just acclimatization. This is human evolution in real time, documented by modern genetics. For flora and fauna, the adaptations are equally extreme. Plants grow low to the ground, hugging the earth to escape the desiccating winds, developing tiny, thick leaves to conserve water. Animals like the Tibetan antelope have enormous nasal cavities and hearts to process thin air. The entire ecosystem is a masterclass in survival under duress, a biome built on scarcity, ultraviolet radiation, and cold, where life exists by rewriting its own fundamental rules. The plateau is a biological laboratory of extremes. As we conclude this first 1,000-word leg of our journey, you must understand that this is merely the foundation. We have established the plateau as a dynamic geological force, a global climate dictator, and a crucible for life. But the most urgent chapters are yet to come. We will delve into the silent crisis brewing in the permafrost, explore the surreal daily reality of human cultures in the clouds, and confront the fragile future of these sky-high realms in an age of rapid change. This narrative is vast, interconnected, and critical to understanding our planet's past, present, and future. So if your mind is already reeling from the scale of what we've just covered, I need you to do one thing right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This is a deep, 5-part exploration you will not want to miss. We are just getting started, and the most shocking revelations are still ahead. Your engagement is what allows deep dives like this to happen. Become part of this community of curious minds, and let's uncover the secrets of the plateau together. Now let's push further. Let us now descend, metaphorically, from the grand planetary scales and enter the intimate, silent, and chilling world of the plateau's frozen memory, the permafrost. This is the second, more clandestine layer of our high-altitude narrative, a story locked in ice and now, alarmingly, beginning to thaw. Beneath the thin, hardy grasses and resilient soils of these cloud-skimming plains lies a hidden dimension, ground that has remained frozen for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. This permafrost is not merely frozen dirt. It is a cryogenic archive, a meticulously preserved record of past climates, ancient ecosystems, and a carbon stockpile of staggering proportions. The shocking data point that anchors this entire chapter is this: the world's permafrost, with high-altitude plateaus like the Tibetan holding a significant portion, contains an estimated 1,500 billion tons of organic carbon. To put that brain-numbing number into perspective, that is almost double the amount of carbon currently in the entire Earth's atmosphere. This plateau, this serene expanse under a sky of clouds, is sitting on the single largest vulnerable carbon bank on the planet, and the lock on that bank is melting. The narrative here shifts from creation and adaptation to a slow-motion release of a planetary scale. The process is deceptively simple and terrifyingly efficient. For millennia, cold temperatures have acted as a deep freezer. Plants have grown in the short summers, died, and been buried before they could fully decompose. Layer upon layer of this organic matter has accumulated, and the perpetual cold has prevented the microbes that normally break down dead plants and release carbon dioxide and methane from doing their job. The carbon has been sequestered, locked away in a deep freeze. This is the plateau's hidden role as a global carbon sink, a service it has performed silently since the last ice age. But now, with global atmospheric temperatures rising, the delicate thermal balance of these high-altitude regions is being disrupted more rapidly than almost anywhere else. Data from meteorological stations on the Tibetan Plateau shows a warming rate approximately 3 times the global average, a phenomenon known as elevation-dependent warming. The thin, dry air at altitude cannot hold heat as effectively, leading to more direct solar heating of the ground and a complex feedback loop involving snow albedo reduction. The result is unambiguous. The permafrost is warming and, in many areas, actively thawing. When that thaw occurs, the ancient microbial community, dormant for centuries, wakes up. It feasts on the suddenly available organic buffet. Their metabolic processes respire, and in doing so, they exhale greenhouse gases, both carbon dioxide and, in waterlogged conditions where decomposition happens without oxygen, the far more potent methane. This is the heart of the permafrost carbon feedback loop, one of the most feared tipping points in climate science. Warming causes thaw, thaw releases gases, those gases cause more warming, which causes more thaw. It is a self-perpetuating, self-accelerating cycle that, once significantly initiated, becomes incredibly difficult to stop. Recent studies using ground surveys and satellite data have begun to detect increased methane emissions from high-altitude wetlands and thermokarst, lakes, ponds formed by meltwater in collapsing permafrost terrain. The plateau in this chapter of our story transforms from a passive landscape into an active, breathing agent of climatic change. It is no longer just responding to global warming. It is beginning to contribute to it in a major, measurable, and escalating way. But the thawing archive holds more than just carbon ghosts. It releases physical, tangible echoes of the past. As the ice retreats, it reveals a paleontological treasure trove and, more disquietingly, biological time capsules. The melting ice patches of places like the Tibetan Plateau have yielded remarkably preserved specimens of ancient fauna, from woolly rhinos to extinct species of horses, their flesh, hair, and stomach contents intact. This is a scientific boon, offering unprecedented insights into prehistoric ecosystems. However, it also raises a more speculative, yet concerning, possibility: the release of ancient pathogens. While the risk of a pandemic causing zombie virus is low and sensationalized, the principle is sound. Viruses and bacteria frozen for millennia could be revived. In 2015, scientists successfully revived a 30,000-year-old giant virus from Siberian permafrost. And while it only infected amoebas, it proved the viability of the concept. On a high-altitude plateau, a landscape intimately connected to river systems that flow down to population centers, the ecological, biological ramifications of a widespread thaw extend far beyond greenhouse gases. The ground is not just exhaling carbon. It is whispering secrets and potential threats from a bygone age. This narrative of the thawing third pole is perhaps the most urgent and least visually dramatic chapter of the plateau's story. You cannot always see permafrost. Its crisis is subterranean, silent, and incremental, measured in tenths of a degree of soil temperature and parts per million of methane in the air. Yet, its implications are planetary. It directly challenges the carbon budgets calculated by the IPCC and threatens to undermine global climate mitigation efforts. The data flowing from research stations on these plateaus is not just academic. It is an early warning signal for the entire world. The stability of this sky-high land is inextricably linked to the climate security of the billions living at its feet. As we move from this hidden, chilly world back to the surface, Our perspective must carry this new weight. The plateau is fragile. Its timeless appearance is an illusion masking a system in profound flux. And this realization forces the next question: who lives on this precarious, breathtaking stage? And how do they navigate the thin line between tradition and transformation? That is where we must turn our gaze next, to the human cultures woven into the fabric of the clouds. But before we do, if you are valuing this deep, interconnected exploration of our world, please take a second to show your support. Leave a comment below with the word plateau. It helps this video reach other curious minds like yours. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We are building a community here that cares about understanding the planet in depth. Now let's meet the sky dwellers. Emerging from the silent, frozen depths, we arrive at the vibrant, resilient, and profoundly human layer of our story, the civilizations of the sky. To inhabit a high-altitude plateau is to engage in a daily dialogue with extremity, a negotiation of life conducted at the very ceiling of human habitability. This is not a life of mere survival. It is a life of profound cultural and spiritual synthesis, where every tradition, every ritual, and every daily chore is ingeniously adapted to the overwhelming presence of the sky and the scarcity of the earth. The people of the Tibetan Plateau, the Altiplano, the Ethiopian highlands, and others are not just residents of a difficult environment. They are its philosophers, its artists, and its most intimate interpreters. Their shocking truth, borne out by anthropological and sociological data, is this: they have achieved a socio-ecological balance in one of the world's most marginal environments, creating rich, complex cultures that view the landscape not as an adversary to be conquered, but as a sacred entity to be revered and harmonized with. Their existence is a masterclass in sustainable living forged over millennia of trial, error, and deep observation. Let's ground this in the tangible. Consider the fundamental human need: shelter. Architecture here is a direct response to brutal physics. On the Tibetan Plateau, you find stone and rammed earth houses with walls that are thick at the base and taper inward, creating a low, stable profile against howling winds. Windows are small to retain heat, and roofs are flat to handle minimal rainfall and maximize sun exposure for drying fuel and food. In the Andes, adobe brick provides excellent thermal mass, absorbing the intense daytime sun and slowly releasing it through the freezing nights. These are not aesthetic choices first. They are thermodynamic equations solved in mud and stone. Then there is sustenance. Agriculture defies logic here. The growing season is brutally short. Frost is a constant threat, and the soil is often poor. The response: incredible botanical ingenuity. On the Altiplano, the staple is not a European import, but the native potato, with thousands of varieties cultivated, each bred for specific microclimates, altitudes, and resistances. In Tibet, the crop is barley, not the typical kind, but a cold-tolerant, high-altitude variety that is parched and milled into tsampa, the caloric-dense flour that is the cornerstone of the diet. Animal husbandry revolves around species that are themselves marvels of adaptation: the yak in Tibet, the llama and alpaca in the Andes. These animals are not merely livestock, they are partners. They provide wool for clothing that is warmer than sheep's wool, meat, milk, fuel from their dung, and are beasts of burden capable of traversing terrain that would break a horse. The entire economic and nutritional system is a closed, efficient loop honed by necessity. But the adaptation goes deeper than the material. It is woven into the very spiritual and cognitive fabric of life. The dominant spiritual frameworks in these regions, Tibetan Buddhism and Dean cosmovision, are profoundly ecological. They are not religions of escaping the world, but of being in profound relationship with it. In Tibetan Buddhism, the landscape is animate. Mountains are deities, Yulha, lakes are spirits, Lu, and the wind carries prayers. This creates a powerful conservation ethic, To harm the mountain or pollute the lake is not just bad ecology, it is sacrilege. Similarly, in the Andes, the concept of Pachamama, Earth Mother, and Apus, mountain spirits, governs resource use. Offerings are made before planting, and reciprocity with the earth is a fundamental principle. You take only what you need and you give thanks. Psychological studies have shown that these worldviews contribute to remarkable resilience and well-being in the face of undeniably harsh conditions. The culture provides a narrative that makes sense of the environment, offering not just practical tools for survival but existential meaning within it. The high-altitude dweller does not see a barren, oxygen-starved wasteland. They see a sacred, living home, full of agency and spirit. Yet, this delicate, ancient equilibrium is facing unprecedented pressures from the 21st century. Climate change is the most pervasive threat, altering precipitation patterns, accelerating glacial melt that feeds vital rivers, and bringing unfamiliar pests and diseases. But alongside it comes the force of globalization and development. On the Tibetan Plateau, the railway and extensive road networks, while bringing economic opportunity, also facilitate migration, cultural dilution, and increased pressure on resources. Mining operations on the Altiplano seek lithium and other minerals crucial for the global green energy transition, but they consume vast quantities of water in an already arid landscape, creating conflict with local communities and agriculture. Tourism, a double-edged sword, brings income but also pollution, waste, and the commodification of culture. The very technologies that make life easier, fossil fuels for heating, synthetic fabrics, processed foods, begin to unravel the traditional, sustainable loops that have endured for centuries. The young generation, connected to the world via smartphones, is often drawn to the cities and the lowlands, leaving behind aging populations and a potential rupture in the transmission of irreplaceable indigenous knowledge. The plateau cultures stand at a crossroads, grappling with how to integrate the benefits of modernity without sacrificing the ecological wisdom that is their deepest survival tool. This human chapter is therefore one of poignant tension and innovation. It is a story of herders using satellite phones to monitor weather and market prices, of communities setting up ecotourism cooperatives to control the impact of visitors, and of scientists partnering with indigenous elders to document traditional ecological knowledge before it is lost. The data here is qualitative but powerful. Studies show that community-managed conservation areas, informed by traditional practices, often have higher biodiversity and better ecosystem health than state-managed parks. The people of the plateau are not passive victims of change. They are active agents, negotiating a new path. Their struggle is a microcosm of the global challenge: how to live well without degrading the very systems that sustain life. Their historical success offers a library of potential solutions for resilience in the face of environmental stress. As we leave the bustling, spiritually rich world of the high-altitude human, we must now lift our eyes once more, not to the cultural landscape, but to the immediate, tangible, and awe-inspiring sensory experience of simply being there. What does it actually feel like to stand on that plateau beneath a sky full of clouds? That visceral, personal encounter is our next destination. But as we transition, your role in this journey is vital. If this fusion of culture, ecology, and human spirit is resonating with you, please give this video a thumbs up. That simple act tells the algorithm that this in-depth content has value, allowing it to reach more people who crave substance. Now let's step onto the plateau ourselves. To truly know the high-altitude plateau, one must move beyond data, beyond culture, and into the realm of raw, unfiltered sensation. This is the chapter of the personal encounter, the phenomenological experience of standing on the roof of the world, beneath a sky that is not a distant vault, but an immersive, pressing presence. Imagine stepping out of a vehicle or ending a long trek, and the first thing that hits you is not a sight, but a feeling, a profound, bodily awareness of thinness. The air feels insubstantial, like trying to breathe through a faint veil. Each inhalation requires a conscious effort, a slight deepening of the breath your body automatically attempts to compensate for the missing molecules. Your heart, a diligent but confused pump, beats a little faster, pushing harder to distribute the oxygen-thin blood. A mild, persistent headache might hum at the base of your skull, the body's gentle protest against this alien environment. This is the immediate, physiological baptism of altitude, a constant low-level conversation between your biology and the atmosphere, reminding you with every pulse that you are a visitor here, operating on a deficit. Then, you take in the light. At 4,000 meters, you are above a significant portion of the Earth's atmosphere, the protective blanket that scatters and filters the sun's rays here. The sunlight is mercilessly direct, painfully brilliant. It has a sharp, crystalline quality, casting shadows so dark and defined they look like cuts in the landscape. The ultraviolet radiation is intense, necessitating goggles and thick sunscreen. A few hours of exposure can burn skin not just red but raw. Yet, this same light is transformative. It saturates colors to an almost impossible depth. The blue of a high-altitude lake is not just blue. It is a hypnotic mineral turquoise, a color that seems to vibrate with inner light, derived from glacial flow rock particles finely ground by glaciers and suspended in the water. The white of a distant snow peak is not just white. It is a blinding, transcendent glare. The browns and greens of the grassland are rendered in stark, vivid contrast. This is a landscape painted in primer colors, its visual drum amplified by the thin, clean air. And then there is the silence. It is not merely absence of noise, it is a positive, palpable entity. The constant low hum of insects, the rustle of dense vegetation, the distant murmur of traffic, all the sonic blankets of the lowlands are stripped away. What remains is the wind. It becomes the voice of the place. You hear it coming from miles away, a sigh that builds into a roar as it sweeps across the open plain, unimpeded by trees or topography. It whips past your ears, a constant, sculpting force that has shaped every rock, every plant into streamlined submission. In the moments when the wind dies, the silence is absolute, a ringing vacuum so profound you can hear the blood rushing in your own ears. This silence is humbling, even intimidating. It magnifies small sounds, the crunch of your own boot on gravel, the rustle of your jacket, the sound of your own breathing, which now seems absurdly loud in the vastness. This auditory landscape forces introspection. There is nowhere for sound to hide, and by extension, nowhere for you to hide from the sheer scale of your surroundings. That scale is the final, overwhelming sensory input. The plateau's geography creates a phenomenon of deceptive distances and monumental perspective, because the land is relatively flat and open, and the air is so clear you can see for over 100 miles on a good day. A mountain that looks like an hour's walk away might be a day's journey. Your brain, calibrated to the cluttered horizons of lower altitudes, struggles to process this depth of field. The sky itself becomes a dominant topographic feature. Clouds are not just above you, they are around you. You can watch storms build and travel across the expanse, seeing the curtains of rain connecting cloud to earth miles away, while you stand in a pool of sunlight. At night, with minimal atmospheric interference and light pollution, the Milky Way is not a faint smudge, it is a thick, detailed river of stars, so bright it casts faint shadows. The celestial dome feels closer, more intimate, and the planet's rotation becomes perceptible as the stars wheel overhead with silent, majestic speed. You are standing on a planetary observatory, a natural platform for viewing the cosmos. This total sensory immersion, the thin air, the brutal light, the articulate wind, the profound silence, and the staggering scale culminates in a specific emotional and cognitive state often reported by travelers and documented in psychological literature. A blend of awe, humility, and clarity. The ego, so noisy and demanding in the human-built world, shrinks to insignificance. You are a transient speck on an ancient, breathing landform under an infinite sky. This is not a depressing realization, but a liberating one. It puts human concerns into a geological and cosmic context. Problems that seemed vast in the lowlands can feel manageable, or at least placed in a truer proportion. The mind, freed from its usual clutter of stimuli, can achieve a rare focus. This is why these landscapes have been the chosen retreats for mystics, hermits, and philosophers for millennia. The environment itself is a teacher of perspective. To experience a high-altitude plateau is to undergo a gentle but firm recalibration of your senses and your sense of self. You leave changed, carrying the memory of that thin, bright, silent vastness within you. But our journey cannot end with this personal, poetic note. We must return, one final time, to the hard truths of the future. Having felt its grandeur, we are now obligated to ask, what becomes of this sky-born realm in the coming century? The final chapter is one of urgency, choice, and global responsibility. And as we prepare for that crucial conclusion, your engagement becomes more important than ever. If this sensory journey resonated with you, please take a moment to share this video with one person you think would appreciate it. Spreading this knowledge is the first step toward fostering the care these places deserve. Now let's confront the future. We have traversed the dimensions of the high-altitude plateau, its tectonic birth, its climatic dominance, its biological crucible, its silent carbon thread, its rich human tapestry, and its overwhelming sensory reality. Now, we arrive at the synthesizing and most critical chapter, the integrated future. The plateau is not a series of isolated systems: geology, climate, ecology, culture, but a deeply intertwined complex, a single, fragile organism where tremor in one system sends shockwave through all the others. The central, urgent thesis of our conclusion is this: the fate of these sky-high landscapes is a brilliant, concentrated lens through which we can see the fate of our entire planet. They are not remote, irrelevant extremities. They are the canaries in the coal mine of Earth's biosphere, reacting first and most dramatically to the changes we are unleashing. The data, when woven together, presents not just a warning, but a clear map of interconnected crises and, importantly, potential pathways toward resilience. Let's trace a single, potent chain reaction to illustrate this interdependence. It begins with the global driver: increased concentrations of greenhouse gases from human industry and agriculture. This leads to elevated global temperatures. On the plateau, this manifests as elevation-dependent warming, melting glaciers and thawing permafrost at an accelerated rate. The melting glaciers reduce the long-term, stable water supply for the major rivers born on the plateau: the Indus, Ganges, Yangtze, Mekong, Yellow, and Asia. The rivers feeding the Amazon and La Plata basins from the Andes. In the short term, glacial melt can increase river flow and cause flooding. In the long term, as the glaciers vanish, it leads to profound water scarcity for billions downstream. Simultaneously, the thawing permafrost releases its ancient carbon, further amplifying global warming in a vicious feedback loop. The changing temperature and hydrological patterns alter the alpine ecosystem. Plant communities shift upward, squeezing cold-adapted species into ever smaller habitats, leading to extinction. The altered vegetation and soil moisture, in turn, change how the plateau's surface heats up, potentially modifying the very monsoon dynamics it drives, jeopardizing the rainfall patterns for agriculture across continents. Meanwhile, the human communities on the plateau face the direct impacts. Pastoralists find traditional grazing grounds degraded. Farmers face unpredictable frosts and droughts, and their entire cultural and economic fabric strains under the pressure. One anthropogenic input, excess greenhouse gases, triggers a cascading failure across geological, climatic, ecological, and human systems on a continental scale. Confronted with this daunting web of challenges, the path forward cannot be simplistic or singular. It requires a multi-pronged, globally coordinated strategy that respects the plateau's complexity. First and foremost is the obvious yet non-negotiable global action: aggressive mitigation of climate change. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally is the only way to slow the warming that is destabilizing the entire system. This is a planetary responsibility. Second, we need a massive increase in targeted interdisciplinary science. We must understand the plateau systems with far greater precision, deploying networks of sensors to monitor permafrost temperature, soil moisture, glacier mass, greenhouse gas fluxes, and biodiversity changes. This data is not academic. It is essential for creating accurate models to predict changes in water availability and climate patterns for the billions who depend on them. Third, and crucially, we must move beyond seeing these landscapes as either untouched wildernesses to be preserved in a vacuum or resource frontiers to be exploited. We must support integrative conservation and adaptation models that center indigenous and local communities. Their traditional ecological knowledge, honed over millennia of observation, is a priceless data set for understanding ecosystem resilience and managing resources sustainably. Projects that combine satellite data with herders' observations of grassland health, or that use indigenous water management techniques to enhance climate resilience, are showing great promise. The goal is biocultural conservation, protecting both biological diversity and the cultural systems that have sustained it. Finally, this leads to a necessary shift in our own global perspective, a cognitive and ethical call to action. The high-altitude plateau, in all its majesty and fragility, teaches us the fundamental principles of interconnection and scale. It shows us that a geological process in the remote interior of Asia dictates the rainfall in Bangladeshi rice paddies. It demonstrates that a herder's decision on the altiplano about llama grazing can affect soil carbon storage. It proves that the stability of our global climate is intimately tied to the temperature of frozen ground 4 miles in the sky. This understanding dismantles the illusion of separation. We are all downstream. We are all downwind. We are all participants in a single planetary system. The plateau story is ultimately our story, a story of incredible dynamism, resilience, and beauty, but also a story of profound vulnerability to the choices of a single species. Therefore, as we end this 5,000-word exploration, the call to action is direct and personal. This is not a passive documentary. It is an invitation to engagement. First, educate yourself continuously. Seek out scientific literature. Support documentary filmmakers and journalists who cover these regions in depth. Second, use your voice and choices as a consumer and citizen. Support political leaders and policies committed to strong, science-based climate action and to the protection of indigenous rights and knowledge systems. Choose products and companies that prioritize sustainable sourcing and minimize environmental impact. Third, if you have the means, consider responsible, mindful tourism that directly benefits local community cooperatives and follows strict leave-no-trace principles. But recognize that some places may be too fragile for any tourism at all. And finally, right now, for this channel, your engagement is the fuel for this kind of in-depth, original research-based content. If this journey from the depths of the earth to the edge of the cosmos has changed your perspective, please show it. Hit the like button with conviction. Subscribe to this channel and ring the bell so you never miss one of these deep dives. But most importantly, leave a comment. Tell me what shocked you the most. Was it the permafrost carbon bomb? The genetic adaptation of humans? The spiritual ecology of the cultures? That dialogue in the comments is where this community grows and learns. Share this video with friends, family, on your social media. We have just scratched the surface of one of Earth's most profound landscapes. There are countless other stories of deep oceans, of vast deserts, of microscopic worlds waiting to be told with this same depth and respect. But I need you with me. Be part of this community of the curious, the concerned, and the connected. The story of our planet is the greatest story ever told, and it needs all of us to listen, to understand, and to act. Thank you for watching, for engaging, and for caring. Until the next exploration.